Now they're coming in. We just opened the gates and they're starting to come in now.
Just like Disneyland.
That's right. So I'm Christy. I'm the marketing director for MassMEP. I'm going to be your moderator today. You guys do not get Haley. She's a lot better at this than I am, but that's okay. I'm going to do my best. So we're just going to give it a minute or two. We're going to let people start to come through the door and find their seats, and then we will get started. So I'll give it one more minute and I'll go into my long-winded spiel. I see Mr. Gusha in there. Hi, Jim. You
Hey,
can't
Jim.
talk back to me, but I'm saying hi to you. All righty. Oh, Jim raised his hand. He's saying hi back. Thanks, Jim.
Oh no, he could be a guest speaker. I mean, if he wants to.
We'll unmute him and allow him to talk, right? All right, well, to be respectful of everybody's time, I'm going to get started. So like I said, I'm Christy Grignon, the Marketing Director with MassMEP, and we welcome you all to the MassMEP AIM HR Solutions webinar event, Workforce Development Training. Our panelists today are Lisa Derby Oden, Project Development Coordinator with MassMEP, and Kathleen Worthington. I'm ready, Kathleen. Here we go. Senior Director of Education and Workforce Training at AIM HR Solutions. So again, thank you all for joining us. As you can see, your mics are all muted, but there are plenty of ways for you to engage with us this morning. Polls, Q&A, and chat. Note where the Q&A and chat are located, usually on the bottom of your screen. And we will be actively answering those throughout the webinar, but we'll leave some time for questions at the end as well. Upon completion of the webinar, you will receive a notification to complete an evaluation of this webinar. MassMEP and AIM HR Solutions uses these evaluations to provide data for these trainings and insight for continuous improvement on the training content. If you complete the evaluation, the content presentation will be made available to you through the email address you provided on the evaluation. Please note that the content is to be used for internal staff educational purposes only, and understand that the information provided in the webinar today is proprietary to MassMEP and AIM HR Solutions. I am now going to turn this over to our panelists, Lisa Derby Oden and Kathleen. Take it away.
Thank you, Christy. She sounds like a flight attendant. I feel safe now. Okay, so welcome everybody.
It's great to have you all here.
Yes, we're thrilled. All right, are we ready? We've got 45 minutes to cover a lot of territory. We'll start off with our agenda. We've done our introductions, expectations. We want to manage them and be clear. This is an overview at a high level of the general grant and some of the processes. And we will share some best practices and tips that we've learned through working with companies across the Commonwealth. So there's 3 grants, and we'll just compare briefly the different and distinctions between them all. And we'll talk about training that can and can't be included, and that's really important when you're filling out your application, that we get it right. Grant development timeline, about how long is it going to take? Is it 2 weeks? Is it 2 years? We'll go through that timeline. There is a grant questionnaire that we'll talk to you about, and that's really your pre-work to getting ready to fill out the application. Very helpful document. The certificate of good standing, that is your #1 box to check to make sure that it's timely and it's current. So that's an important one we'll talk about. Metrics, how are you going to measure the impact of this training grant afterwards? Our applications must show before and after improvement. And we've got lots of categories for you to pick from, and you may have some others as well. And then there'll be time at the very end for some FAQs. We're very fortunate to have Christy behind the scenes keeping an eye on questions. If you do have one while we're going through the webinar, feel free to pop it in and she'll take a look at it. We may cover some of the things that you're going to be asking about, so she'll let us know that. But if it's a showstopper and we really feel it's relevant to where we are right there in the webinar, we'll take a quick moment to address it. But most will be at the end, please, so we stay on course. Lisa, anything else to add, or are we good?
I think that gives the agenda pretty well, Kathleen.
Okay, moving on. So who do we have on this webinar? That would be something we'd really love to know. Could you please chat in your name and your company and just shoot it in quickly right now for us. Thank you. We'll give you just a few seconds. Christy, are you getting some? Okay. Lisa, do you see a list?
I see that there are, hang on. Yes, I see Darlene from BTTS LLC, Rick Tremblay from Prefer Melamines, and Jim Gusha from MassMEP that have identified themselves. There are more than that here on the call, but those are the ones that have chosen to participate.
All right. Well, you
chat.
can certainly remain hidden. That's not a problem, and it's not a requirement. It's just always kind of fun for people to see who else is on. All right. Thank you for doing that. We welcome all of you. Now let's go forward. This is a really important site that you're going to want to mark, the Workforce Training Fund site. Commonwealth Corporation is our gatekeeper, if you will. They are the keeper of the funds that the state sets aside, and they are the grant administrators. So they have a really robust workforce training fund site, and we will give you that link there. We'll get you into the resources that you will need. So that's a good one to bookmark. And they are our partners throughout this process. They're the ones that recommend approval or not to approve to the advisory board. And they're the ones that give us feedback throughout the process if we've applied and something doesn't look quite right. We can come back and we'll get some feedback from them. And sometimes we're able to correct it and resubmit. So they are our important partners, and we really love working with them.
So I think that we have a poll that we should be rolling out here.
All right. So anytime, Nat, we're going to have a poll. Yeah, and we're looking for you to tell us, what's your experience level? Where are you in this grant process? Are you brand new to a grant? Just exploring? You've done this for years. You just want to see what's new and current? Let's take a look. We've got a lot of explorers.
Yeah.
We've got some of you just starting this process. We don't have anybody well underway, which is no surprise given what we've been facing the last 3 or 4 months. Okay, we have 60. Okay. Yeah, 67% of you are just exploring. 33% of you have just started. So thank you for that. That helps us kind of gauge what, our audience, where they are and what they need. So terrific. I do want to congratulate any of you that are underway, which is pretty remarkable given so much of what we've been having on our plates. Yeah. So, but the development is still important and the funds are still available. So good for you. Okay, next please, Lisa. All right, we can stop sharing that, put that poll there. So, what are the fund priorities, the general program priorities? When we're looking to get an application approved, what are they looking for? They're looking for us to tell the story that jobs are going to be retained, jobs are going to grow, wages are going to increase, there may be even promotions, you're developing your talent pipeline. And that training is really going to make a difference in your productivity, your competitiveness, and your ability to do business in Massachusetts. They're really looking for a commitment that you're going to stay and grow here. You're going to have deep roots here in Massachusetts with your business, and that there's a commitment to provide significant investment on your part for training for the duration of the grant. This isn't just a big check that pays for everything. It's a 50-50. It's a partnership. And we'll go into that detail a little further down the road in our webinar. But your story, when you start to create your cover letter that goes with your application, really should be about how you've grown and how you're going to continue that growth from a talent perspective and a business perspective. They go hand in glove. So that's your first tip for the day. Okay, Lisa, tag.
Okay. was going to say, so I'm next up, and I wanted to just provide an overview of the Workforce Training Fund has 3 different grant funding mechanisms that are available to companies. And so we're talking primarily today about the general grant, which applies to a business of any size. And the other 2 grants, the Express Grant and the Direct Access Program, both apply to businesses with 100 or fewer businesses. There are some discrete differences between these grants, and we'll talk a little bit about those in terms of the funding and the way all of that works and that kind of thing. So specifically in the general grant, what must a company contribute in the general grant, which is what we're talking about today? General grants can be anywhere from $10,000 all the way up to $250,000, although that is a sizable amount of training to bite off if you were thinking of doing that. You really want to plan your grant in a strategic way and apply for the funding that makes sense for the strategy and not just based on the dollar amount that you can get totally. However, in the general grant, what the companies must provide is they must provide a match dollar for dollar. And by that, that means that the employees will be paid their regular working wages while they're in training. And so that amount of money that they are being paid while they're in the training is your dollar match. So if a training were to cost $5,000 and it was being delivered to 10 people, the wage match for those 10 people would need to equal $5,000 as well. There is no need for the company to provide additional finances beyond that into the grant, into the training if that is met. There are a few other criteria, however. The training must not come out to more than $350 per hour as well. So there are some other, some details behind the scenes that make a difference on these funding mechanisms as well. The Express Grant, on the other hand, and again, it's for companies with 100 or fewer employees, companies must contribute 50% of the cost of the training. And again, the employees still must be paid their wage while they're in the training. Businesses can receive up to $30,000 each year, with the maximum amount per trainee of being $3,000. And then the Small Business Direct Access Program is different. In the first 2 models, in the Express Grant and the General Grant, the trainers come to your facility or deliver it virtually nowadays. Right now, a lot of the delivery is done virtually. But with the Small Business Direct Access Program, you generally send a few employees out to a specific location where, there's a lot of different companies, enrolled for that training for that day. And again, this is businesses with 100 or fewer employees. 100% of the cost of that training will be paid for, and there's a catalog basically of trainings that you can choose from that you would be able to send your people out to. So there's also, like, in terms of timelines, there's deadlines and turnarounds. There's no deadline for the general grant. They're submitted on a rolling basis, and usually decisions are made within 60 days of the submission. Same thing with the Express Grant. There's no deadline necessarily, although the individual courses might have enrollment deadlines and that kind of thing. And that's the same situation with the Direct Access Program. In a general grant, that grant is for a 2-year time frame. Okay, it's got to be completed within 2 years or less. And the same thing with the Express Grant, complete it within 2 years or less. So then we're going to move along into the details here about the general grant. We did already sort of talk about a lot of these, and that the grant maximum is up to $250,000 and not less than $10,000. Time approval 60 days after submittal. Earliest start date is 90 days. There's a contracting period that takes place once you've been notified that you've been awarded the grant, and that is what accounts for that additional 30 days. And with a general grant, it's always been that once you've completed your general grant, that you would have to wait a year before you could apply for another general grant for other training initiatives not covered under the grant that you just completed. However, there has been a temporary exemption because of the COVID-19 situation, and the Workforce Training Fund is waiving the 1-year waiting period for grants that closed between May 20th of 2019 and May 19th of 2020. And so if you completed a grant in that time frame, there is no waiting period. You can just go ahead and apply again. And it looks like we have a poll. What's your experience level with grant funding? Are you a rookie or are you a seasoned veteran? I think based on the previous poll, we've got one seasoned veteran here.
I wonder if his initials are JG.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking that too. I bet I know who that is. Okay, so the rest of everybody else is a rookie. So,
Great.
Yeah. So we're hoping that this is going to be providing you some of the background stuff that you really need to get your grant started.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about different kinds of training that can be covered under the general grant. Again, we're referring primarily to that. There's basic skills such as, some of the stuff that maybe you wished you were better at when you were in high school, the basic math, reading, business writing, and that kind of thing. But, and basic manufacturing skills, since I'm from MassMEP. But English for speakers of other languages is a huge one here as well. And Commonwealth Corporation, who runs the Workforce Training Fund program, really has an appreciation for companies that work to address that particular issue. Technical skills, which are job specific. And again, a lot of these right here are geared towards manufacturers, since that's the leaning that MassMEP has. Maybe Kathleen, you could kind of pipe in and talk a little bit. No, because most of yours are under the organizational skills, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. They are.
Yeah. So technical skills, if you're a manufacturer, would include, that list of things you see there. This is not a total list. These give you ideas of kinds of training that can be covered. And then organizational skills, which is geared towards, creating really high performance organizations that cover leadership topics and HR topics and team building and problem solving and project management. And maybe you want to shout out a few of the topics that you folks provide, Kathleen.
Sure. One of our most popular ones that are in grants is our Frontline Supervisor Training Series. So for those that are brand new to the supervisory role or have been in it for a while and need a little refresher, that's a wonderful series to really create a foundation and create a supervisor's toolkit, if you will, so they can go out and they can provide feedback and coaching and solving problems and building a team, that kind of thing. We also have a good one, a good series on customer service, which fell in the technical skills, but it's also on the interpersonal too. And customer service for drivers, delivery drivers, we have a lot of different spins on it. So those would be two I would shout out. I would notice, Lisa, on the technical skills, they should note that their health and safety is in that category. beyond government mandate, you know, the mandates you have to pay for, you have to run yourself, but there's a possibility, you know, for health and safety training as well. And that's
Right.
in front of our minds right now, especially.
Yeah, I was going to say, just because you, you know, if you don't see a training topic here that you think you might be interested in, doesn't mean that you can't get it. This is just a list of examples, and we do have a fine list of third-party providers. For example, we use Darcy Cook at Safety Trainers for a lot of the additional training that you're talking about, Kathleen, and
Right.
she's doing a tremendous COVID-19 program right now, getting companies back up and running with that. So,
Right. So this is just a sampling.
hang on, got to get my, there we go. So you started to mention this, Kathleen, that some training will not be approved, and that's definitely true. So things that are mandated trainings that by either state or federal agencies, such as OSHA or DOT, or things that are even mandated by your corporate headquarters, you know, those are considered sort of costs of doing business. And so, you know, that's up to you and would not be covered by the grant. If you have training that you already have underway, or training that is ongoing training for your company, those also would not be funded by the training. And anything that is viewed as cost of doing business, you know, getting somebody started right away in the company, you know, as for orientations, or if you're doing refresher training or anything like that, and training that's basically requirements of somebody doing their job, those would all be on you. But the continuing education, once somebody's got that, you know, operating level experience and how to grow within the company and those kinds of things, all of those kinds of things are covered by the training. One thing I want to mention is if you are, funny little story, if you're awarded a grant, we had a company that was awarded a grant, and they were really all gung-ho about having been awarded the grant. And so when it was announced, however they announced it, and I'm not sure how they announced it to their company, but so the department, one of the departments in that company was like, just like, yeah, we're on this. And they started doing the training before the contract was signed. And so, you know, that meant that that particular training was then not going to be covered because they hadn't waited for the contracting period. So that's just a little simple tip of something to kind of avoid, really. So there are, I'm sorry, were you going to say something, Kathleen?
Well, I was just going to say, curb that enthusiasm. Hang on and just give it a little time for the ink to dry. Get your plan in place, and then start your training.
Absolutely. So there are certain priorities for these grants, and greater weight is given to certain circumstances for these funds. And so if your company is going to be growing as a result of the training and increasing the skill and the opportunity of low skill or low wage workers, that's definitely one of the driving forces behind the grant, as is if you're a minority or woman-owned enterprise. That's one of the additional priorities. And here we come again with the ESOL kind of programs, the adult basic education and the ESOL, you know, trying to bring everybody up to a certain level of workability and then ability to earn income and that kind of thing. There is also something called a consortium grant, which is a form of a general grant. And what this does, like I said, you know, the general grants, there's a lot of money available. And if you're just a small company, you might be sort of intimidated by that, or you might say, you know, I can't really afford to take a lot of people off the floor every day out of production to accomplish this training. And so in that circumstance, a consortium grant can be a really wonderful thing. And a consortium grant is a grant where several companies get together and they outline their training needs, and they do shared training then. So every company sends sort of onesies, twosies, if you will, to the training so that the grant as a whole winds up making match. And we've had several very successful consortium grants that we've run, and would be happy to work with anybody on those.
All right, so how about some application best practices? We'll save you some time by outlining 5 of them right now. Number 1, make sure that you have executive sponsorship. Actively engage your stakeholders. It should not be surprising them. You know, you're working behind the scenes and then they don't know what you're doing, of course. So senior leadership, because you want to cascade that support all the way down through the organization once it's time to launch. Your employees too, let's not surprise them. Let them know that you pay attention to their development. You're trying to grow their skills. Number 1 reason why people leave companies is, believe it or not because of money, but because they feel stuck. They feel stuck, they're not growing, they're not learning, there's nowhere else to go. So let them know you're on this. And if you have a union environment, let the reps know as well. So communication, top down, really important right out of the gate. Focus on a few key training goals that support critical business needs over the next 2 to 3 years. You want to be tactical, but you want to also be strategic. So look out, and I know it's really hard to know what's coming around next week, the way we've been, the environment we've been in currently, but try to look out beyond and then just narrow it down to a couple and then do them really well. Sometimes we get ambitious and we put 5 or 6 in a list, and that can be a lot, especially if it's your first time. So get a couple identified that'll really make a difference. Clear training objectives to achieve those goals. We're going to talk about smart objectives, being very specific and measurable, achievable. They're actually possible to achieve, relevant to the work and the business, and time bound so that you can put a stake in the ground and pull out the measuring stick and see how well you've done. Those SMART objectives are really important.
Yeah.
And then consistent messaging throughout your application. We've gotten some feedback back from Commonwealth Corporation after an application has been submitted, and they'll say, you said this on page this, but then you said that on page this. The story's not matching. And so I like to think of them as amazing editor auditors. They are going to check every page very, very thoroughly. So your message must be consistent. So that's where we can come into play, Lisa and I and our team, where we'll help you to make sure, and we'll edit it down and we'll vet and we'll make sure that you're really tight and clear. So those are 5 that I like to focus on early on. Okay, moving on. So timing, 4 to 12 weeks. But it also depends on your level of involvement. Are you going to work on it 15 minutes a week? Are you going to work on it, 2 hours a day? It really depends. And making sure that you have the right resources, the right people available to support you when you're getting down into the, kind of the weeds of the application and really getting very clear on the objectives, the KPIs. You're going to need some people from your organization to be available to help clarify the detail and get it right. So it's really up to you to drive the training. We don't drive. We're along for the ride with you, but could take 4 weeks, could take 12 weeks, could take 10 months. It's really up to you. We feel that once you get some momentum going, it's good to just focus. I call it lock yourself up for a couple weeks. If we could, lock ourselves up, hunker down, and get it going, because then you'll feel really good that, it's done. Okay. And here's a sample schedule. You predetermine the training need and the key areas of focus. That's up to you. You know your company best. You also know your internal budget and what's been established or what will need to be supplemented. And then, of course, you've got your buy-in from your stakeholders and making sure that we've heard what's important to them. And then we just mapped out a little rough schedule of, day 1, initial visit, what we would be doing, week 2, week 3, and so on. So we'll guide you through that process. And this is just a little sample so you get a flavor for how it can flow.
Yeah, it's really sort of a roadmap of, you know, how to get from the start to the end.
Right, right. So Lisa said this earlier on, but applications, I think of it as like rolling admissions back in the day when you're applying for college. They can be submitted anytime, but you know, the Workforce Training Fund Advisory Board was meeting on the third Tuesday of every month. And so we like to tuck it in right before they have their meeting so that you don't have to wait another couple months. So timing is important, and we can help guide you through that. And then from submission to approval or rejection can take as much as 60 days. So managing your own internal expectations is important, that once you submit, be patient. They'll be communicating, but it may take some time. And then, as Lisa said, don't be scheduling your training before you have contracted with your providers and the ink is dried. Just be thinking, though, in your head, you know, what training you want first, second, third, and you'll be thinking, mapping out your schedule. But you're going to have to wait another, you know, couple months generally to make sure you have all your ducks in a row. Okay. And I think it's time for another poll. We did mention that we were going to talk about this grant application. And so let's pop up the poll. There's this questionnaire we're going to talk to you about, but Nat, here he comes. We have this wizard in the background who we absolutely appreciate. Lisa, do you see anything?
I don't yet.
I don't either.
Well, there we
oh.
go.
Are you interested in learning more about an express grant or the Small Business Direct Access Program grant? Before we go any further, we want to just check that, because then we can follow up. Not everybody will be able to apply for a general grant right out of the gate. Maybe you're a small business and you just want to try, you know, a couple training classes and want to go through the express. Let's see what we've got. Oh, we don't have any interest right now, so maybe we've got the right people in the general grant webinar. That's okay too. All right, let's close that. I think that tells us what we're looking for. Thank you. We're on the right webinar. All right, so the grant application questionnaire, just briefly, it's a wonderful little like 3 or 4 page document, and it's going to ask you a little bit about why this grant, why are you applying for this grant? It's going to get you ready with contact information that the grant will be asking for. It'll get you started early on thinking about your key performance indicators, your KPIs. How are you going to measure the before and the after? You know, so how are you going to measure? So what KPIs are you going to use? Sometimes we work with companies that look at us and say, to be honest, we don't have any KPIs right now. And I'll say, well, I think you measure something. So what do you measure? So we'll help you identify those KPIs. But that's just your little pre-work. And then we just cut and paste, tuck it into the application, and it will save some time, and it warms up your thinking for some of the little more meatier questions that come a little later in the application. Okay, so that's that one, and we share that with you. That's something that we have for you. Okay, Lisa, I'm going to tag and let you take this one.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Certificate of Good Standing. This is something that is required of every single applicant to the grant. And it can be a little bit confusing only because, yes, indeed, Massachusetts has 2 different certificates of good standing.
Of course they do.
There's one from the Department of Revenue, which the sample is projected onto the screen right now. There's also one from the Department of Commerce. The one from the Department of Commerce actually costs you money to apply for and get. And that's not the one you want. And if you've got that one, ComCorp is not going to accept that one in lieu of this one. This is the only one that applies to the grant funding. I'm going to go to the next slide. Oh, no, I thought we had the sample in there. Hang on. I'm sorry. There we go. It skipped ahead 2 somehow. So this shows you the red X is on the one that you would get if you got from Department of Commerce. And the one on the left-hand side is the Department of Revenue. You can apply for that online. You can have it emailed to you. Usually when you apply for it, you will have it within a week at the latest, but usually frequently
Faster.
even between 24 hours.
Yeah.
So, you know, and it's just what it's doing is verifying that, you know, you're up to date with your DUA, your Department of Unemployment Assistance information.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, Lisa, to this one, this is your go, no-go ticket. You have to get this checked off. This has to be a go, or it's a deal breaker for the application. So you get that one early on, and then you may, you know, pass go.
Right, it's usually the very first question that comes out of our mouths. Do you have your certificate of good standing? So,
yeah.
Okay. And then we're just going to talk a little bit about some of the parts of the grant application itself. This is exactly what the questions look like on the grant application. The training plan summary, this is an important piece, but it's actually usually the piece that you write very last after you've put your whole plan together. Much like a business plan, you put your executive summary together last in a business plan. So this is a little bit like that. And it gives you limited space to use, and they just want a really top level view of what you're going to do in your training. And primarily what you're doing is you're listing the training initiatives that you're going after. And that's about it. It's the information that gets publicized when the state releases the information. So again, you want to keep it broad, and you don't want to include any financial, proprietary, or other sensitive information that you would not want to be put out in a public press release. The objective, on the other hand, this is really where the meat of the matter of your grant. And so what they want to know is, you know, what problem are you having? What are your pain points? What are you trying to do? Why do you want this training? And again, you know, sometimes people will say, well, you know, here's what we want for training. You know, we need lean because we need to operate better. Well, you know, we need to know in a little bit more depth than that. How do you know that you need to operate better? You know, what are those things that are causing you the problems that you're having? And that's really what you want to go into more detail about in the objective, but leave that training plan summary for that high level view.
Right. I would say, like, what is better? You know, you're having trouble with on-time delivery, or you're having trouble with, you know, customer service. You're getting, you know, you have issues there. So being really clear and specific. Yeah.
And this is just a screenshot of what the application itself looks like. You know, and the boxes that you have to fill in, and the menu on the left-hand side, and those two topics that we just talked about. You know, there are little help sections all the way along through the application itself, so that if you need help understanding more what they're asking about, they sort of provide that with little help things as you go along. One of the things you want to make sure is that you save early and save often on your application. Never hurts to hit that save button. Make sure you don't lose what you've got. And another thing is to remember that only one person can be logged into the application at a time. If somebody else tries to log in at the same time as you're in there, you will get booted out, and it's possible you lose what you've entered.
Yeah. Very good. All right, so I'm going to move along. We were almost out of time, but these are important, and I want you to know that we're here to help you identify some key objectives. And if you just scan down through the list, you know, improving basic skills, productivity, production, reducing scrap, or improving quality. And then remember, we're going to make them SMART. So it's going to be really specific, and we're going to put a timeline around it. So moving to the next slide would be then again another sample sheet where sample training impact metrics. Oftentimes people sit in there, this is the hard one. They don't know, you know, what are we going to measure? How do I measure? So we have some suggestions here. And then we take a look at what you're currently measuring. What matters? Mm-hmm. So are you going to create some jobs? How many do you think? You know, are you going to have some promotions? Are people going to get some raises? How many? What's the percentage? Are you going to increase your sales this year from X to Y? So those types of things are samples. Okay. Lisa, tag to you.
Okay, and so this talks about, again, how the calculation for the match is figured out. Basically, you need to provide how many trainees from each of these professional categories that are mentioned here: managers and executives, professional, technical, sales and marketing, production and construction, service, and administrative and support positions. And you need to be the one who defines who fits in those categories and just be consistent with how you use it throughout the grant. There is no definition provided for that. You need to then put in the number that will be trained across the grant and what the average hourly wage is. And so then the application itself then calculates how many unduplicated trainees you'll have, as well as the average trainee wage expense. And that is what that average trainee wage expense is what is used in calculating your match requirement for the general grant.
Lisa, may I just jump in for this one, if you don't mind? I wanted them just to also see that because they have so many categories of employees, thanks, do realize that a good training, a robust training strategy doesn't just target one particular type of employee or group of employees. But we're talking about changing growth across and developing across the organization, enterprise-wide. So really think there's something for everyone, top down, can all be developing and learning. And I think that will also help your match, but it also is a really great training strategy.
That's an excellent point that you make there, Kathleen, for sure.
Okay. Well, we made it. Holy cow, frequently asked questions. Here we are. Lacey, you want to tag, or let's see. First we should ask Christy, did we have any questions that we should address?
No questions yet. I'll let you guys know if anything pops up.
Okay, great.
All right. So we should ask them, how will they know if they're eligible to get grant funding? Well, first of all, what's the first box you need to check? If they were to chat in, they would say, what would we say, Lisa?
What? If
Number one, how do you know to start off eligibility, you've got to have a what?
Certificate of good standing.
Oh, you win the car. Exactly. That's right. And where'd you get it from? You got it from?
Department of Revenue.
All right. Not the Commerce.
Department of Commerce, right.
Right. I know, then you have to write a check. Okay. We were awarded a grant a few years ago. May I apply for another grant?
And so we did talk about this, is usually when a grant closes, you need to wait a year to apply for another grant. However, during these COVID times, they have waived that exception for grants that were closed from May 20th of 2019 to May 19th of 2020. And so you could reapply right away if you were a grant that did that.
Right, right. And then what are matching funds? Lisa did a nice job, I think, of saying.
Yeah, we already talked about
employer piece, yeah. My application's approved, when can I start? I hope we were clear, not right away. Wait and do the contracting piece, then you can start. So it's a couple months. What happens if my application is not approved? What if I get rejected, Lisa?
I was going to say, so I know one of the things that happens is when you submit your application, sometimes they'll come back to you with some clarifying questions before they have made the award even, or the, no, sorry, no. And so you want to be quick as you can in replying to their responses and provide as much detail as you can for what they're asking. If the application is not approved, usually they also send along some kind of guidance and direction saying, here are the weak spots, and if you develop these further, then we can reconsider your application again. So it's never that you're shut out completely. They usually provide some kind of guidance about how to get back in it to get some funding for yourself.
That's great. That's right. 6 is what is a consortium grant, and I would say that's another webinar that we do. Yeah. And actually, we do an in-person info session, and we just did one this spring. And we would love to talk to you about that, especially if you're a small company and don't think you can take on a lot of training all at once because of you're keeping the business running. So we'll be happy to talk to you about that. They're really great option. And what's your next step? What would we say their next step is, Lisa?
Well, I would say if they have any questions that they should reach out to us. That would be one thing. We do have our contact information up on the next slide. I will jump ahead to that so that they can see that. And if they're interested in developing a grant or they're getting started with thinking about their strategy, we'd be certainly happy to help them with that process.
Yeah. It's important for you to know from we do not charge for our coaching. This is just, you know, goodwill, and we hope you'll consider us as one of your training partners throughout this process, and, you know, later on as you're delivering training. That's really what, you know, our desire is, to be part of the journey in the beginning and throughout. So, but do know that we don't charge, and it's just the right thing for us to do, and we're really excited when companies get awarded their grants and start developing their people. It's great.
Well, you guys' timing couldn't be better because it just started pouring here in Auburn. So thunderstorms might be headed your way. Thank you guys all so much. Thank you everybody for your time today and attending. And don't forget that after the webinar, you will receive an email to fill out an evaluation, and we'd love for you to do that. So thank you guys so much. There are no questions. I think you guys covered everything in great detail, so they don't have any questions. So thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe. Bye.